Verthax took a long, slow breath before continuing his story. This part was harder to tell. This part still gave him nightmares, even after all these cycles. In the 9th month of the siege, we captured a human, he said. Her name was Amy Grant, and she was a medic. The cadets leaned forward. Capturing a human was rare. The humans fought to the death, and they never left their own behind if they could help it. Getting a living prisoner was a significant achievement. The capture happened during a raid that went wrong for the humans. A team of 6 had tried to destroy a communication tower deep in Dominion territory. They succeeded in their mission, but the extraction went badly. 5 of them escaped into the darkness. Amy Grant did not. She was injured when they found her. Her left arm was broken in 3 places. The bones pushed through the skin in one spot. She had pieces of metal in her stomach from an explosion. She was losing blood at a dangerous rate. The Dominion soldiers who found her called for medical support immediately. This was standard protocol. Even enemies deserved medical care under galactic law. A team of physicians arrived within minutes, ready to save her life. She refused their help. We thought she did not understand, Verthax said. We thought maybe the translator was broken, or she was confused from blood loss. But she was perfectly clear. She said that accepting medical help from the enemy would create a debt, and humans do not carry debts they cannot repay. The physicians explained that she would die without treatment. The arm would become infected. The shrapnel would cause internal bleeding. She had hours to live, maybe less. Amy Grant looked at them calmly and said, "Then I will die." But she did not die. Instead, she treated herself. Verthax had been assigned to guard duty outside her cell. He watched through the observation window as the small human woman did things that should have been impossible. First, she tore strips from her own uniform with her teeth and her one working hand. She made them into bandages and used them to slow the bleeding from her stomach wounds. Then she set her own broken arm. I have seen many terrible things in my life, Verthax told the cadets. I have watched cities burn. I have seen friends die in front of me. But nothing prepared me for watching that human female set her own bones. She braced the broken arm against the wall of her cell. She took a deep breath. And then, with a single sharp movement, she snapped the bones back into place. She did not scream. Verthax knew she wanted to scream. He could see it in her face, in the way her whole body went tight with agony. But she bit down on a piece of her own uniform instead. She bit so hard that blood ran down her chin. But she did not make a sound. When the bones were set, she used the strips of cloth to make a splint. Her hands were shaking badly, but she kept working, tying the knots with her teeth when she needed to. The shrapnel was next. She found a small piece of metal that had come loose from her boot. It was not sharp, not really, but she worked it against the floor until it had an edge. Then she used it to cut into her own stomach. I wanted to look away, Verthax admitted. I wanted to call the physicians and force them to help her. But I could not move. I could only watch as she dug into her own flesh, searching for the pieces of metal that were killing her. She found 3 pieces of shrapnel. Each one came out covered in blood. Each time she dug into herself, her face went pale and her breathing became rapid. But she never stopped. She never even paused. When she was done, she cleaned the wounds as best she could with water from her cell's small sink. She packed them with more strips of cloth. And then she lay down on the floor and closed her eyes. Verthax thought she was dying. He thought her efforts had been pointless, that she would bleed out on the cold metal floor. He almost felt sorry for her. Then she opened her eyes and looked directly at the observation window. She looked right at Verthax, even though she should not have been able to see him through the one-way glass. And she smiled. That smile would haunt Verthax for the rest of his life. It was not a smile of victory, he said. It was not a smile of hatred. It was something worse. She was showing us that pain meant nothing to her, that we could do anything to her and she would endure. She was telling us, without words, that we had already lost. The prisoner exchange happened 3 days later. The humans had captured several Dominion officers during their raids, and both sides agreed to a trade. Amy Grant walked out of her cell under her own power. Her arm was still in its makeshift splint. Her stomach was still wrapped in bloody bandages. But she walked straight and tall, with her head held high. Lieutenant Brooks was waiting for her at the exchange point. Verthax watched from a distance as Amy Grant approached her commander and saluted with her one working arm. "Private First Class Grant reporting for duty, ma'am," she said. "I apologize for my absence. When can I return to my post?" Brooks looked at her for a long moment. There was something in the lieutenant's eyes that Verthax could not identify. Pride, maybe. Or love. Or something else that had no name in his language. "After you get proper medical treatment," Brooks replied. "And after you get some food and rest." Amy Grant nodded. "Yes, ma'am. And then? And then we have work to do." The human medic turned and walked toward her compound. She did not look back at her captors. She did not show any sign of anger or resentment. She simply returned to her people, as if the last 3 days had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "That was when I began to understand something important," Verthax told the cadets. "We had been fighting the humans as if they were soldiers, as if they followed the same rules we did. But they were not soldiers, not in the way we understood the word." He paused, searching for the right way to explain. "In most species, soldiers fight because they are ordered to. They follow commands. They do their duty. When the situation becomes hopeless, they surrender, because surrender is the logical choice. Preservation of life is the highest value." The cadets nodded. This was standard teaching in every military academy in the galaxy. Humans are different. They do not fight because they are ordered to. They fight because they choose to. Every moment of every day, they make the choice to continue. And they will keep making that choice, no matter what happens, until they are physically unable to make any choice at all. Amy Grant had been given a choice. She could have accepted medical treatment and lived in comfort until the prisoner exchange. She could have rested and healed and let others take care of her. Instead, she chose to suffer. She chose to prove that the Dominion had no power over her. She chose to show that even captured, even injured, even dying, she was still fighting. "That is what makes humans terrifying," Verthax said. "Not their strength, not their technology, not their numbers. It is their choice. They choose to fight. They choose to suffer. They choose to die rather than give up." He looked at the young cadets with sad, knowing eyes. "And you cannot defeat an enemy who has already decided that death is preferable to surrender. You can kill them, yes, but you cannot beat them. They will never admit defeat. They will never stop fighting. They will go to their graves believing that they won, because they never gave in." The room was very quiet. Some of the cadets looked sick. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked scared. Good, Verthax thought. They should be scared. Everyone should be scared of beings who could do what Amy Grant had done. "But that is not the end of the story," he continued. "That is not even the worst part. The worst part came later, in the 10th month, when the humans stopped being civilized." He settled back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. "Remembering, let me tell you about Private Jake Murray, and what his death did to the people who loved him." By the 10th month of the siege, both sides had settled into a terrible routine. The Dominion would attack. The humans would fight back. Soldiers would die on both sides, but the humans always lost fewer. The compound still stood. The 47 had become 36, but those 36 showed no signs of giving up. Verthax had grown used to the war by then. He had stopped thinking about victory or defeat. He simply did his duty and tried to stay alive. Like most of the Dominion soldiers, he just wanted it to be over. Then Private Jake Murray died, and everything changed. Jake Murray was the youngest of the human soldiers. He was only 19 years old, barely an adult by human standards. He had a round face and short brown hair and a smile that never seemed to fade. Even in the worst moments of the siege, Jake Murray could make his fellow soldiers laugh. He was not a great warrior. His shooting was average. His tactical skills were nothing special. But he was loved. Every human in that compound cared about Jake Murray because he reminded them of what they were fighting for. He was innocent and kind and hopeful, and he believed with all his heart that they would win. Jake died on a water run. The humans had found a small spring about a kilometer from their compound. The water was clean and fresh, much better than the condensation they scraped from walls. Every few days, a small team would sneak out to fill containers and bring them back. It was dangerous work. The Dominion had snipers watching the area, and the humans could never be sure they were not walking into an ambush. But the water was worth the risk. On that day, Jake Murray volunteered to go. He had done the run many times before. He knew the safe paths and the dangerous zones. He was careful and quick, and he almost made it back. The sniper shot him from nearly 2 kilometers away. It was an incredible shot, 1 in a million. The bullet hit Jake Murray in the chest, and he died before he hit the ground. His team brought his body back to the compound. They did not leave their dead behind, not ever. For Thax heard about the death through intercepted communications. At first, he did not think much of it. Soldiers died all the time in this war. One more casualty, one more name on the list. What did it matter? But Lieutenant Brooks did something unexpected. She requested a ceasefire to hold a proper burial for her fallen soldier. This was permitted under galactic law, and the Dominion general agreed. There would be peace for 12 hours while the humans said goodbye to their youngest dot, or so everyone thought. When the ceasefire began, Lieutenant Brooks walked out of the human compound alone. She carried a white flag in one hand. In the other hand, she carried a small electronic device. She walked to the exact spot where Jake Murray had been killed. She planted the white flag in the ground. And then she turned on the device and spoke. Her voice was broadcast on every frequency. Every Dominion soldier heard her words, whether they wanted to or not. My name is Lieutenant Katie Brooks, commanding officer of the 47th Marine Expeditionary Unit. 36 of my soldiers are still alive. One of them, Private Jake Murray, died here yesterday. He was 19 years old. She paused. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. Something cold and hard and dangerous. Jake liked bad music and worse jokes. He wrote letters to his mother every week, even though they would never be delivered. He never complained about his duty, not once in 10 months of hell. He believed we would win. He believed it until the moment he died. Another pause. For Thax remembered how quiet everything became. Even the wind seemed to stop. This flag marks the place where Jake Murray fell. It is sacred ground now. In his memory, I am giving you one chance. Leave Corridor 7 within 48 hours. Take your ships. Take your soldiers. Take everything. Just go. She looked directly at the nearest Dominion position, as if she could see through the walls and machines to the soldiers hiding inside. If you do not leave, we will stop being civilized. We have been fighting you with rules. We have been following the laws of war. We have been merciful when we did not have to be. That ends now. Her voice dropped lower. It was almost a whisper, but somehow it carried across the entire battlefield. Jake Murray believed in those rules. He believed in mercy and honor and doing the right thing. He is dead now. And with him died my patience, my restraint, and my willingness to play by your rules. She picked up the white flag and began walking back to her compound. 48 hours. Then we show you what humans do when we stop being kind. The message ended. The ceasefire continued. And in the Dominion Command Center, General Krathvalum laughed. Foolish creatures, he said. Do they think threats will frighten us? We have 200,000 soldiers. They have 36. Let them do their worst. He ordered a massive assault to begin the moment the ceasefire ended. Every weapon, every soldier, every resource would be focused on destroying the human compound once and for all. Verthax was part of the assault force. He remembered standing in formation, listening to the general's speech about honor and duty and the glory of the Dominion. He remembered feeling confident. There were so many of them. The humans could not possibly win. The ceasefire ended at sunset. The assault began immediately. The Dominion soldiers advanced in perfect formation, supported by artillery and air support and everything the military could provide. They expected desperate resistance. They expected the humans to fight hard, but eventually fall. They did not expect what actually happened. The first sign that something was wrong came when the artillery stopped working. Every single gun, all at once, went silent. The Dominion technicians found that the targeting computers had been infected with some kind of virus. The guns were still functional, but they would only fire straight up into the sky. The second sign came when the communication network collapsed. Soldiers could not talk to their commanders. Units could not coordinate with each other. The entire army became a collection of isolated groups, unable to work together. The third sign came when the assault force realized that the human compound was empty. The humans were not there. They had left during the ceasefire, slipping away through tunnels and hidden paths that the Dominion had never found. 36 soldiers had vanished like ghosts, and no one knew where they had gone. Then the killing began. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. They struck from the shadows, from underground, from places that should have been impossible to reach. They did not fight like soldiers anymore. They fought like demons. Command posts exploded without warning. Supply depots burst into flames. Officers died in their sleep, their throats cut by unseen hands. The assault force, which had been moving toward the compound, suddenly found itself being attacked from all sides. We lost contact with the general's position at midnight, Verthax said quietly. When we finally reached his command center, we found him dead. Him and his entire staff. 40 soldiers, killed without a single alarm being raised. Written on the wall in blood were 5 words. This is day 1. The assault collapsed. Soldiers scattered in panic, trying to find safety, trying to escape the invisible enemy that seemed to be everywhere. By morning, 3,000 Dominion soldiers were dead. The humans had lost none. That was when we understood what Lieutenant Brooks had meant, Verthax told the cadets. She had not been making empty threats. She had been giving us a warning, a chance to escape. And we had been too arrogant to listen. He shook his head slowly, remembering the chaos and the fear. The next 4 months were the worst of my life. The humans were no longer fighting a war. They were conducting a hunt, and we were the prey. The cadets were very still. Some of them looked like they wanted to leave, but they did not move. They needed to hear the rest. Let me tell you what humans become when they stop holding back. Let me tell you about the end of the war. Verthax was quiet for a long moment. The cadets waited, barely breathing. They knew the story was almost over, but they also knew the worst was still to come. The last 4 months of the siege were not warfare, he finally said. They were education. The humans were teaching us a lesson, and we had no choice but to learn. After the failed assault, the Dominion forces fell into chaos. The chain of command had been broken. The general was dead. Officers were afraid to take charge because they knew the humans would target anyone who seemed to be in control. The humans used this chaos perfectly. They sabotaged the life support systems on Dominion ships in orbit. The ships did not explode. That would have been merciful. Instead, the air slowly became unbreathable. Soldiers had to evacuate into space, crowding into escape pods, watching their mighty warships become useless metal coffins. They hacked into the communication networks. But they did not simply disrupt communications. They used them. They broadcast the dying screams of Dominion soldiers to their families back home. They sent detailed reports of every death, every failure, every humiliation. My own family heard me crying during a night raid, Perthax admitted. They thought I was dead for 3 days before they received word that I had survived. The psychological damage to our civilian population was enormous. The humans left survivors. Always survivors. And every survivor carried the same message back to their people. Tell them what happens when humans get angry. Sergeant Danny Cole, the starving warrior they called the Hungry Ghost, led a team that captured the Dominion's regional command station. It was a massive facility in orbit around a nearby moon, housing thousands of soldiers and containing enough supplies to maintain the siege for years. The humans did not destroy it. That would have been the logical military choice. Instead, they occupied it. They used its resources to launch raids deeper into Dominion space. They turned the Dominion's own weapons against the Dominion itself. Cole broadcast a message from the captured station. He had regained some weight by then, eating Dominion food, but his eyes were still hollow and hard. "You tried to starve us," he said. "Now we will eat your lunch, and your dinner, and everything else you have. We will take what you thought was yours, and we will use it to hurt you. This is what happens when you corner a human. We do not die quietly. We bite." Corporal Maria Santos, the woman who had crawled for 16 hours to destroy an ammunition depot, became something even more dangerous. She trained an entire resistance movement. There were other species living under Dominion rule, people who had been conquered generations ago and forced to serve. Santos found them. She talked to them. She taught them. Within 2 months, 3 star systems that had been quiet for centuries erupted in rebellion. The Dominion had to pull forces away from Corridor 7 to deal with the uprisings they had never expected. Their empire was cracking, and the cracks were spreading. And then there was Amy Grant, the medic who had refused treatment, who had set her own bones and dug shrapnel from her own stomach, had healed during the months after her capture. She returned to duty with a new purpose. She walked into a Dominion hospital ship, alone, unarmed. She walked past guards and security checkpoints as if they did not exist. When she reached the central medical bay, she asked to speak with the chief physician. "I need your help," she said. "My people are dying. We do not have enough doctors. We do not have enough supplies. I am asking you to help us." The chief physician was confused. "You are the enemy. Why would I help you?" "Because you became a doctor to save lives," Amy replied. "That is what you care about. That is why you studied for years and worked so hard. Saving lives. It does not matter whose lives they are. A life is a life." She talked to him for 6 hours. She told him about the siege, about the suffering, about Jake Murray and Lieutenant Brooks and all the others who had fought and died and refused to give up. She did not threaten him. She did not try to trick him. She simply told him the truth. When she was finished, the chief physician made a decision that shocked everyone. He defected. He joined the human cause, bringing 47 medical staff and all their equipment with him. That was when the Dominion leadership finally understood, Perthax said. The humans were not just winning the war. They were changing everything. They were turning our own people against us. They were making our strength into weakness. The surrender came 9 days before the 14-month mark. The new Dominion General, the third one to hold the position after the previous two died, requested a meeting with Lieutenant Brooks. He did not demand anything. He did not make threats. He simply asked to talk. They met on the same neutral platform where the war had begun. The same place where a small human female had smiled at a laughing general and promised to outlast him. "We offer unconditional surrender," the general said. "Corridor 7 is yours. We will withdraw all forces immediately. We ask only that you stop." Lieutenant Brooks studied him for a long moment. She had lost weight too, during the siege. Her face was thin and tired, but her eyes were still bright, still burning with that fire that never went out. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not 6 months ago? A year ago?" The general hesitated. This was not easy for him to admit, because we finally understand that we cannot win. Not because you have more soldiers, not because you have better weapons, because you will never stop. You will fight us until there is nothing left to fight. You will burn everything down rather than surrender. And we are not willing to pay that price. Brooks nodded slowly. "No, you are not. That is the difference between us. You fight to win. We fight until there is nothing left to fight against." She accepted the surrender. The war was over. Verthax stood up from his chair. His old bones ached, but he forced himself to stand straight. The cadets needed to see this moment clearly. "We lost over 30,000 soldiers in that siege," he said. "The humans lost 23. 23 people held off an empire for 14 months and won. Not because they were stronger, not because they were smarter, because they had something we could never match." A young cadet raised her hand. "What was that, honored veteran?" Verthax made the Kethri gesture of respect, one warrior to another. "Spite," he said. "Humans are powered by spite. Tell them they cannot do something, and they will do it just to prove you wrong. Hurt them, and they will crawl through broken glass to hurt you back. Corner them, and they will tear down the walls rather than admit defeat." He walked toward the door of the hall. The cadets watched him go, silent and thoughtful. "That is why the Galactic Council made humans our allies instead of our enemies," he said. "That is why we do not speak of the Terran contact wars in polite company. And that is why, if you are ever foolish enough to threaten a human, you should pray to whatever gods you believe in that they decide you are not worth the effort." He paused at the door and looked back at the young faces one last time. "Because if they decide you are worth the effort, there is no force in the universe that will save you. They will chase you to the ends of the galaxy. They will sacrifice everything they have. They will die with their hands around your throat and a smile on their face, knowing that at least they took you with them." The old veteran stepped through the door and vanished into the night. The cadets sat in silence for a long time after he left. They had wanted stories of glory and heroism. Instead, they had learned something far more valuable. They had learned to be very, very careful around humans, and somewhere, far away on a small blue planet called Earth, billions of humans lived their lives without knowing how much the galaxy feared them. They went to work. They raised their families. They laughed and loved and complained about ordinary things. They had no idea that in the dark spaces between stars, their name was spoken in whispers. They had no idea that great empires had changed their policies because of 47 people who refused to quit. They were just humans, after all. They did not think of themselves as special, but Verthax knew the truth. He had seen it with his own eyes. Humans were the most terrifying species in the galaxy, not because of what they were, because of what they could become. The starfall screamed out of jump space like a wounded animal lunging at its killer. Smoke poured from her engine compartments. Warning lights flashed across every console. Half her systems were failing or already dead. She was broken, burning, and completely outgunned. She was also 90 minutes early. Velther gripped the railing near his observation post as the ship shuddered around him. On the main screen, the Draketh fleet filled the view. 4 massive warships hung in orbit above Elysium 4, their weapons still glowing from the bombardment of the surface below. "Contact!" Ensign Marsh shouted. 4 Draketh cruisers, bearing 035. "They're turning toward us." Captain Bennett stood at the center of the bridge, her feet planted wide against the ship's violent shaking. She had not slept in 30 hours. Her uniform was stained with sweat and smoke. But her eyes were clear and focused, and her voice was steady as stone. "Good," she said. "Let them come." "Captain," Velther called out, unable to contain himself any longer. "You must see the situation clearly. Your ship is damaged. Your engines are failing. You face 4 enemy vessels. Coalition doctrine requires immediate withdrawal, and Coalition doctrine can wait." Bennett did not even look at him. "Marsh, target the lead cruiser. Santos, prepare all forward weapons." Nina Santos worked her console with fierce concentration. Her right arm was wrapped in a bandage from an earlier accident in the engine room, but she showed no sign of pain. "Weapons ready, Captain." Full spread. The Draketh ships were approaching now. They were massive compared to the Starfall, each one carrying 3 times her firepower. On their bridges, Velther imagined the Draketh commanders laughing. 1 damaged human ship against 4 of their best cruisers. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. "They're hailing us," Ortega reported. "Ignore it." Bennett's voice was ice. "Fire." The Starfall unleashed everything she had. Missiles streaked through the void. Energy beams cut through the darkness. The first volley slammed into the lead Draketh cruiser before they could raise their shields. Explosions blossomed across its hull. Secondary fires broke out. The ship listed hard to port. Velther stared in disbelief. The humans had achieved complete surprise. The Draketh had not expected anyone to come. They had not expected a fight. And they certainly had not expected a crippled ship to attack them head-on without hesitation. Direct hit. Marsh shouted. "Lead cruiser has lost main propulsion." "Keep firing," Bennett ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup." The next few hours were chaos. Velther had witnessed many space battles in his career. Kovani engagements were precise and orderly. Commanders gave measured commands. Ships maintained formation. Losses were calculated and accepted. War was mathematics made real. This was not that kind of battle. The humans fought like wild creatures. They pushed their damaged ship beyond every limit, twisting and turning through the Draketh formation. Santos fired weapons with mechanical precision, her injured arm forgotten. Marsh tracked targets and called out warnings with a voice that never wavered. Ortega coordinated damage control teams, sending crew members rushing to put out fires and seal breaches. And at the center of it all stood Captain Bennett, calm and cold and absolutely relentless. "Enemy fighter wing incoming, bearing 170. Point defense, engage. Helm, bring us around behind their second cruiser. Use their own ship as cover. Shields at 40%. Reroute power from secondary systems. Keep shields up. Captain, we've lost weapons control on Deck 3. Switch to manual. Santos, can you handle it?" "Yes, ma'am." Santos was already moving, running toward the damaged section with her bandaged arm hanging at her side. Velther watched her go. She would have to operate the weapons by hand, standing in a compartment that was probably filled with smoke and fire. Any sane soldier would have refused. Any Corvani soldier would have pointed out the futility of the effort. But Santa simply ran toward the danger without a moment's hesitation. The battle continued. 1 hour became 2. 2 became 3. The Starfall took hit after hit. Her hull was breached in 7 places. Fires burned in 4 compartments. 17 crew members were dead or wounded. She should have been destroyed a dozen times over, but she kept fighting. The Draketh began to realize something was wrong. Their easy victory was becoming a desperate struggle. The damaged human ship refused to die. Every time they thought they had her cornered, she slipped away. Every time they closed in for the kill, she struck back with unexpected fury. Second cruiser is breaking formation. Marsh's voice cracked with exhaustion and something else. Something like hope. She's trying to retreat. Don't let her. Bennett's eyes were fixed on the screen. All batteries, concentrate fire. The Starfall turned toward the fleeing cruiser. Her weapon spoke one final time. The Draketh ship's reactor went critical. For a moment, she glowed brighter than a star. Then she was gone, torn apart by the fury of her own exploding heart. A cheer went up from the bridge crew. It was weak and ragged, the sound of exhausted people who could not quite believe they were still alive. But it was real. 2 down, Ortega said. 2 to go. Status of the remaining cruisers? 3rd cruiser is heavily damaged. 4th cruiser is still fully operational and moving to engage. Bennett nodded slowly. The Starfall was dying. Everyone on the bridge knew it. Her engines were failing. Her weapons were nearly depleted. Her shields were barely functional. They had won an impossible victory, destroying 2 enemy ships against all odds. But it was not enough. Not yet. The ground forces, Bennett said. What's their status? Marsh checked her console. Still advancing toward the civilian shelters. They'll reach them in approximately 4 hours. 4 hours. The Starfall could hold the remaining Draketh ships off for another hour. Maybe 2 if they were lucky. But not 4. The math was clear. They had slowed the enemy, but they had not stopped them. The civilians were still going to die. Velthor saw the realization cross Bennett's face. He expected despair. He expected surrender. He expected the captain to finally accept the mathematics of war, to acknowledge that some battles simply could not be won. Instead, she smiled. Ortega, she said, prepare the shuttles. Captain, we can't stop their ships, so we'll stop their soldiers. She turned to address the entire bridge. All combat-rated personnel, report to the shuttle bay. We're going down to the surface. Velthor stepped forward. Captain, that is suicide. The Draketh ground forces outnumber you significantly. You are exhausted. You are wounded. You cannot win this fight. Bennett looked at him with those burning eyes. Watch me. She turned and walked off the bridge. And every able-bodied human followed her. Velthor stood alone in the silence, surrounded by smoking consoles and blinking warning lights. He thought about everything he knew about war. He thought about mathematics and strategy and acceptable losses. Then he picked up a weapon and followed them to the shuttle bay. He still did not understand humans, but he was beginning to suspect that understanding them might not be the point. Perhaps the point was simply to witness what they were capable of, and to be very, very grateful he was not their enemy. The shuttle shook violently as it dropped through the atmosphere of Elysium 4. Velthor gripped his seat. Restraints and tried not to think about how thin the metal walls were between him and the burning air outside. Around him, 43 human soldiers sat in grim silence, checking their weapons and adjusting their gear. They were a ragged group. Many of them were wounded from the space battle. Bandages covered burns and cuts. Some had splints on broken limbs. A young man near the front of the shuttle was coughing from smoke inhalation, but he still held his rifle steady. These were not fresh troops going into battle. These were survivors preparing to fight again. Captain Bennett sat across from Velthor. She had stripped off her captain's jacket and replaced it with combat armor. A rifle was slung across her back, and a pistol hung at her hip. The calm leader from the bridge was gone. In her place was something harder, something more dangerous. Nervous? She asked him. Velthor considered the question. Kovanni did not experience fear the way humans did. Their emotional responses were muted, controlled by centuries of genetic optimization. But sitting in this shaking shuttle, surrounded by exhausted humans preparing to fight impossible odds, he felt something that might have been close to fear. "I am uncertain," he admitted. "This mission has a very low probability of success." Bennett smiled slightly. "So did the space battle." "That is true. Your victory was remarkable. It wasn't victory." Her smile faded. "Not yet. Victory is when those civilians are safe. Everything else is just buying time." The shuttle lurched as it hit turbulence. Through the small windows, Velthor could see the sky turning from black to blue as they descended. Below, the colony of Elysium 4 was burning. Smoke rose from dozens of locations. The Draketh bombardment had been thorough. 2 minutes to landing, the pilot called back. Sergeant Patricia Quinn stood up and addressed the soldiers. She was an older woman, her face marked with scars from battles Velthor could only imagine. Her gray hair was cut short, and her eyes held the steady calm of someone who had seen death many times. "Listen up," she said. "We all know the situation. There are a lot more of them than there are of us. They're fresh, and we're tired. By any normal measure, we shouldn't be here." She paused, looking at each soldier in turn. "But we're not normal. We're human. And down there are 3,000 people counting on us. Mothers and fathers. Sons and daughters. They don't care about the odds. They just need us to show up." Someone in the back shouted, "Then let's show up." A murmur of agreement rippled through the shuttle. The fear and exhaustion that hung in the air seemed to lift slightly. These humans were still scared. Velthor realized. They were still tired. But something had changed. Something had hardened. "Sergeant Quinn," Velthor said quietly. "May I ask you something?" Quinn looked at him with something like surprise. "Go ahead. Why?" It was the same question he had asked many times, but he still did not have a satisfying answer. Why risk your lives for people you have never met? This is not logical. It is not efficient. It defies every principle of military strategy. Quinn studied him for a long moment. Then she sat down next to him, her armored shoulder pressing against his scaled arm. "Commander, have you ever loved anything?" The question caught him off guard. Kovanni do not experience love as humans do. We have partnerships and alliances, but these are practical arrangements, I figured. Quinn nodded slowly. "See, that's the difference between your people and mine. We love things. We love people. We love places and ideas and hopes and dreams. And when you love something, really love it, you don't calculate the odds. You don't weigh the costs and benefits. You just fight for it. Even when you cannot win? Especially when you can't win." Quinn's eyes grew distant. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about human history, about times when people faced impossible odds but refused to give up, about soldiers who died protecting strangers, about ordinary people who became heroes because they chose to stand between evil and the innocent." She turned to look at him directly. "That's what makes us human, Commander. Not our bodies or our brains. It's that we fight for each other. We die for each other. We love each other enough to do stupid, impossible, crazy things." "That seems like a weakness," Velthor said. "It is," Quinn smiled. "It's our greatest weakness. And it's our greatest strength. Because a species that fights only when it makes sense will eventually stop fighting. But a species that fights for love, We'll never stop. We can't. It's who we are. The shuttle shuddered as it touched down. The rear door dropped open, revealing a landscape of destruction. Buildings were collapsed. Trees were burning. In the distance, the sounds of weapons fire echoed across the valley. Captain Bennett was the first one out. She did not hesitate. She did not look back. She simply ran toward the sound of battle, and her soldiers followed. Velther followed too. The march toward the civilian shelters took 2 hours. Along the way, they encountered Draketh scouts. The fights were brief and brutal. The humans moved with terrifying efficiency, covering each other, communicating with gestures and whispers. They made no wasted movements, no unnecessary noise. Private Carlos Reyes took a plasma shot to his leg during the second encounter. He kept walking, using his rifle as a crutch. When Velther suggested he stay behind, Reyes laughed. And missed the fun? Not a chance. Lieutenant Sandra Wright led a small team to flank a Draketh machine gun position. She took 2 shots to her body armor before reaching the enemy. She killed 3 Draketh soldiers with her hands before the rest of her team caught up. Are you injured? Velther asked her afterward. Wright looked down at the smoking holes in her armor. Beneath them, her skin was red and blistered from the heat transfer. I'm fine, she said. Let's keep moving. As they got closer to the civilian shelters, the signs of battle grew worse. Bodies littered the ground, both human and Draketh. The colonists had fought back with whatever they had. Farming tools, kitchen knives, bare hands. They had known they could not win, but they had fought anyway. Brave people, Quinn murmured as they passed a makeshift barricade where a group of civilians had made their last stand. They died, Velther said. Their bravery did not save them. No, Quinn's voice was hard, but it slowed the enemy down. It gave the children time to reach the shelters. It mattered. They reached the main shelter complex as the sun began to set. The Draketh forces were already there, trying to breach the heavy doors. Hundreds of enemy soldiers filled the area, their vehicles and weapons covering every approach. Captain Bennett studied the situation through binoculars. Marsh, can you get a count? Ensign Kelly Marsh, who had somehow kept up with the ground forces despite having no combat training, consulted her portable scanner. Approximately 300 Draketh soldiers, Captain, plus armored vehicles and heavy weapons. And we have 43 people. 44, Velther said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. I will fight with you. Bennett studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Welcome to the unit, Commander. Captain, Ortega said. What's the plan? Bennett looked at the enemy forces. She looked at her exhausted, wounded, impossibly brave soldiers. She looked at the shelter doors that were even now beginning to buckle under Draketh assault. We hit them hard, she said. We hit them fast. And we don't stop until those doors are secure or we're all dead. That's not much of a plan, someone muttered. No, Bennett agreed. It's not. She rose to her feet and checked her weapon. But it's what we've got. Now let's go save our people. They charged into the gathering darkness, 44 souls against 300, and the Draketh learned what human rage truly looked like.